where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see.
A big, powerful America, and shoot them for what?
On that continent, we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other.
I want you to imagine that the election of 2012 just took place, the United States election, and you're in a room, a private meeting that's filled with wealthy business owners who are seeking to fund politics and influence politics in specific ways. And the organizer of this group says in a serious tone that this room is filled with people who have spent at least $1 million on this election. But in our coming election, this room will be filled with people who would spend at least $10 million. So today we're going to be talking about dark money and politics and the Renaissance, right? So we'll be referencing in this book, or this book called Dark Money, and this is by Jane Mayer. And just for literal, I think this really needs to be stated. She does talk about money in both parties, but it does appear that Jane does have a bias towards the Democratic Party, right? And I do think that's important to note, but I don't think that it is something that that we should dismiss in terms of understanding her as kind of a really I guess a nonpartisan point of view. Because I think money's in both parties, and that's acknowledged. And in terms of how much leniency she may give one side, which I don't think she gives really as much, or as much as one would expect, in terms of really skewing the results. I think despite that bias, we're really seeing, and we really need to pay attention to the idea of how money got, or how we really got in this position that we're in now, in terms of the way money is in politics. Now, in all fairness, I really want to put it out there. It does seem like the Republicans were really kept relevant by essentially people with outside money after the 2008 election, where Obama was elected, right? And that like oligarchy, or kind of seems to have significant roots, despite kind of the anti-establishment behavior, or kind of how the anti-establishment behavior of the right nowadays in 2024, 2025. It does appear that this is what essentially kept this the Republican Party relevant, and it's crazy. She kind of outlines a lot in this book, and we'll go through it, and but it's definitely something, because of just when you kind of see how far things have gone based on this idea of what we talked about in the beginning, this meeting where, it was, we talked about how much money was involved in this, or how much money came into this meeting, and, the intention behind that money. But we really, really should have, this kind of does put into perspective the intellectual power powerhouse that could come behind this type of funding and how it could influence large swaths of our population, and in a lot of cases to assume that their political party is the anti-establishment party. In a lot of cases, it's pretty I mean, it's stark. It's stark because, I mean, at some point I feel like I had as kind of on the outside, it was more so like, okay, all of my preferred media figures were, or a lot, not all of them, but a lot of them were essentially like they were being baptized, moving, going to God and Christianity, and it was just like I that's not appealing to me. That's not appealing, and I would say that I would be firmly anti-establishment. So I'm just like, how is this how is this kind of where is this rooted, and how is this coming to be? And it does seem to be. I mean, it's a lot involved, and one thing that Jane points out is this idea of Koch Industries being one of the central, or Koch Industries kind of being one of the central figures, and David Koch being kind of the a lot of this kind of idea of how to influence politics, is really sprouted from what David Koch did, and this idea of really Koch in general and how he went about, getting this amount of money. For those that don't know, Koch Industries has its hands in a lot. It's like the second largest private equity company in America, something like that. And they had their hands in a lot, but including concepts around oil and stuff, oil as well. And it is, it is insane because at some point they talk about how this this guy David Koch ends up on the EPA board, and it is like such. I couldn't imagine like coming into work and you're on the EPA board, or you're like working for the EPA, and you see David Koch just walk in to one of these meetings like, wow, we're just out in the open now. If you probably wouldn't know who David Koch is if you're in this, if you're in the EPA, like you're very much in charge of regulating this guy and what he does, and he just comes right on in and goes to the meeting. Like, this is this is part of, I think, why the EPA is kind of, it's essentially become it's a joke. I think a lot of people need to understand that a lot of our industries, or a lot of our government regulations are just, I don't know why they exist. The element of self-regulation that goes on, and that is like they kind of do this dance with this, with this regulatory body. Why are we pretending? I do think it's a good sign that we still have to pretend, but the fact of the matter is that we are pretending that this is real and these things are regulated. It's kind of a joke. It's definitely a joke. But with Koch in particular, right? So he's responsible for he's kind of a central figure in a lot of pieces of this book in general, and Jane's analysis of really money and politics, and this is something because David Koch, he's kind of like got this he's got really like when I say a shady past, like shady past, like absolutely shady. Like he was involved with some pretty like just conservative groups that are just he was inspired by, not involved with, inspired and like really like excited about a lot of like a lot of groups that that would essentially just be you think about alt-right groups nowadays. These guys are that was these people inspired the alt-right movement, I would say, in a lot of cases. But it's crazy because when we think about like a lot of this stuff, I think a lot of us, when we think about money and politics and, kind of what happened, what the state of today, I think a lot of us kind of view climate change as a political, it's become a political discussion, right? But what's important, in terms of the trajectory of our society, it was, kind of before 2008, it was widely recognized that we are on the path of destroying the earth and destroying essentially ourselves if we keep going. And this guy was able to, he created a strategy, right? And that strategy had to address a lot of what was taking place. Obama was, he ran on kind of this idea of a, more government regulation for a lot of these companies. And it was, it was a movement that could have gotten a lot of support. And this guy Koch, this strategy that he came up with was actually known as kind of the Koch-octopus, right? And that's it became known as that. And there was 3 parts to the strategy, right? One was direct creation and funding of foundations, right? So they they basically funded foundations like Americans for Prosperity, and a lot of, when it came down to the names for a lot of these particular foundations, they made sure to be to be very much hide what was going on in a lot of situations, but definitely the name. That was like really huge for them, right? So like the branding of a lot of these foundations. But if you look into a lot of these places, they do get funding from some very, very controversial, shady figures, and it's not, it's just kind of how it is now. But apparently, this strategy was really brought up around, creating an atmosphere of really just muddying the waters in terms of how people viewed what we were doing in the climate, or with the climate in general, right? And that was like, or what we doing. The climate is one thing, but it's a lot of different things. This is one, right? So you got these fundings and foundations, right? So this is, and number 2, the infiltration of schools or higher education, and that right there was, they knew they needed an intellectual base to defend them, and this was tremendous for them in a lot of different ways, right? They created classes called law and economics, right? And that sounds like they, we talked about how they really learned about the branding, and that sounds kind of like a harmless name somewhat, but the idea was really protecting businesses and, in the face of people who want to protect, natural resources or earth in general. And they got, they were able to they were able to get a lot of backing in terms of the idea of these guys like funding colleges in general, but also funding this idea of where funding comes the idea of this class and this, being able to educate people, it extended past the colleges and to they had retreats where they would invite judges and lawyers and just essentially just get them. I don't imagine. I can't imagine what would happen in retreats like that. But they got some. They got Supreme Court, Supreme Court people Clarence Thomas in there, or Clarence in there too. I'm not sure if Thomas is his last name, but they got some pretty serious figures in there, and I imagine. Once you go to a place like that, you're pretty much primed for the brainwashing that would take place. And these guys had the money, right? And they were able to do a lot with that. Today we got this conversation around how colleges are, how the Republicans want to end college, are kind of against colleges, which is absolutely a point that I'm pro for. I think a lot of colleges have basically gone off the rails with a lot of things, and I think they fail on the promise of success in too many different ways to even really be taken seriously, honestly. But the idea now is, the Republicans are now, gonna make sure that colleges, I think, there's a idea of how to make colleges pay more taxes and things like that, because they're in kind of this kind of golden zone for taxes and things like that. But I think community colleges are gonna be, are probably more important, but they're also they're gonna try to attract people and not really create. They're probably gonna fail in a lot of cases to create that pressure of that really stimulates producing more intellectuals in a lot of cases. I do think we got to think about that, but it's funny to me, right? So that's the second thing, and the third and the final thing was really. This is probably the most this is probably I would say it's this is all shady. So this is tough to say, but I do think this might be the most shadiest out of this Coctoctopus strategy, right? So they want to create, or they decided that they would create quote-unquote grassroots organizations that were essentially AstroTurf campaigns. And what that means is basically everybody there, or a lot of people are essentially paid to be there. And this is there's a company, Goodyear. If that is the car company, I would lose my my stuff. But I'm not sure who that is. But there's a company, Goodyear, that's specialized in literally they have a reputation for creating AstroTurf campaigns, and that is wild. But I think they apparently had a lot of they had a lot of involvement in this idea of grassroots organizations and campaigns, and these campaigns, they were like, at times they were just essentially like, they were successful in making people essentially not feel threatened at feel threatened. Like one of the primary climate scientists, the most famous climate scientist, went into hiding at some point, and essentially like these guys were attacking him, and basically like there was a campaign against what he was doing, and he was like known as kind of one of the primary front runners. I forget his name, but he was one of the primary front runners, I assume, in a lot of these these climate debates, and and really leading climate, really what we were doing in the world with the climate stuff. This is in terms of like this idea, like having a lot of these guys in a room and deciding on this was, this was very, very much they were able to do and strategize to a very serious degree. At some point, you have people who were essentially denying a lot of the climate, research behind the climate, destroying climate. They had a large amount, and they were able to kind of gain a large amount of support from people who were pro-guns, right? And I'm like, that's top tier, this government, and the idea was, government is overreaching, next, you're next. And essentially kind of creating a synergy between the two campaigns, one being completely just false, but the other one, I am personally pro-gun. Like, I think everybody, I think we should definitely regulate, and there's a lot of discussion there, but I don't think there's a discussion really to be had between the framing of the question is, should there be guns in a society, in this society, rather than I think the government should have all the guns. That's kind of where we're at right now with that one in particular. I'm just like, if you frame that question in the right way, you would get a pretty, I think, a less divisive, or a less, I would say a less divisive response in terms of what happens. And that's a sidetrack. But in terms of like the idea of coupling, these activists together, it's not really a sidetrack, because I would say that I am actually we do need, when fish are dying, or when we don't have streams that are filled with fish, we have a problem. And I am also pro-gun. That should not be the coupling of that to make it to where government overreach is makes synergy, or brings these guys together in some kind of synergetic movement, is insane. But it's reality, and I think a lot of us need to understand that. In terms of a lot of the idea of a lot of these foundations, I think the Heritage Foundation in particular, I think got a lot of attention because they created this plan, 2025 or something like that, and they were in the story. They were literally one of the Koch the Koch people, or the foundations that came out of this meeting, or that got support from this meeting. I won't say they came out, but they received support from this particular meeting. and of course they were essentially I would assume they were hijacked to a degree, but also what's crazy is a lot of these foundations, they're scheduled to die with the founders, and the idea is that they don't want to be hijacked by more progressive minds, and that is like if when it comes down to like, oh, I just want to live and make sure that future generations like appreciate my work, there could be like that is so antithetical, like anti like that anti future generation like than I could possibly imagine. But I mean, it's literally a foundation scheduled to die with the people that founded it. And, you know, there is no there is no passing of the torch. This doesn't happen. These guys say, "Hey, we're going to like essentially just cause mayhem and make sure that we close the door behind us." I mean, this is dark. This is very dark, and I have very dark humor, which is why I'm able to laugh at such a thing. But that is crazy to think. And Koch's now this idea, we mentioned a little bit about like Koch's history, right? And what's really fun or what's really crazy is that, you know, this is kind of, you know, I think Jane takes like at least a chapter out to really explain like a lot of what happened in terms of with Koch in general, and I'm only going to go over a brief amount. And get the book if you're interested. I think well, I think I seen a review for it that said, oh, this is like the most important book this year or something. And I was like, that's a pretty shady review, because this book is definitely relevant like past this year, and I would say like, you know, like, but that was like one of the reviews, and for some reason I'm not sure exactly what, but it came off as shady to me, because it's just like it almost like de-incentivized me to get the book. But honestly, understanding where like this is, I mean, this is a tremendous a tremendous transition that our politics has taken, and I think it's very important to essentially really understand where we're at now. And but this idea of Koch's history, this is, I mean, like I could, like I got imagine, like I'm just like looking at the kind of points now, and I'm thinking like I couldn't imagine somebody who would have more incentive to be regulating or to be in the EPA, you know, like regulating himself, because this is I mean, this is legitimately a clown show when you think about like a lot of the sketchiness that's behind Koch. But at some point they had to pay $296 million after their pipelines actually killed someone that was driving, and it was some kind of explosion that happened. And they were like, I think I want to say the family wasn't, they were asking for $20 million, and the Koch tried to settle out, and they were like, no, you're gonna see your day in court, you know, in terms of the actual justice for this particular, you know, incident. And Koch was made to pay $296 million to this family, which I think is phenomenal, because I mean, if you look at like the situation, Koch, it probably had a lot of like room to gray area to self-regulate, and they were warned constantly like that there was like this particular pipeline was leaking, and they ignored it, and it led to this particular incident, and they had to pay. In another incident, they actually, or not another incident, but they were found to be one of the most, I think the most essential or dangerous organization for the climate, because they were dumping tons of mercury into the air, and I want to say water as well. I'm not sure if that was coke, but I also remember dumping mercury into the water. But they had like they destroyed towns essentially, and it was pretty stark. And they were, I mean, literally the most wanted on the EPA's list. Like, that should have been coke. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is like literally, this was a tremendous issue. Another thing was they ignored they ignored safety regulations and essentially fired workers who developed cancer. They I could not this guy, or there was one situation where one guy was literally asked hey, just sweep the mercury down, or it was such a ridiculous thing to say, or to actually take place. But this guy, he was sweeping mercury off of the front porch or something, and he says, hey, how do we get rid of this? And somebody or his boss tells him, hey, just sweep it sweep it on the ground. Sweep it basically, I'm just imagining this guy just basically going outside and sweeping mercury onto the ground, and onto the grass outside the front. And I'm just what could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong at all? But this guy, there's an instance where this guy develops cancer, and this wasn't some surprise to the company. They had literal I want to say checkpoints for this guy, health checks for this guy, and he developed cancer, and it was pretty messed up, because at some point this company found a way to get rid of him, and it was they were getting the health checks, they were getting the the readings for understanding okay, this is having a negative impact, and they ignored it. I want to say at least one time, but maybe twice in terms of the actual yearly check. They ignored it and brushed it aside. And the guy was essentially fired after he got cancer. And when you think about things like that, what could go wrong with not regulating these people to do it's pretty insane. But a tremendous part of this idea, we talk about how gun activists were coupled with a lot of these essentially just astroturf movements, right? And they were able to get more real support, right? They have people bragging about the support they got and how they started, just openly bragging about the idea of starting these AstroTurf campaigns that were now filled with actual people who felt like government overreach was the issue for not for whatever they cared about, but also for these guys, which is crazy to think that I'm imagining some kind of staunch Republican that likes that would essentially, we figure, would like to just go fishing and enjoy fishing or something, and being told that, oh no, the companies that you protect are actually they're actually poisoning the water. So all the fish are dead, and you can't eat them anyway because they're they could have ate mercury at the bottom of the pond or something, so you can't really eat them. And somehow coming to terms with that, like that has to be pretty stark in terms of or the mind behind that coupling, you know, to before these guys come to that realization is ingenious. But I think it's I mean it's unfortunately just ingenious in a way that essentially just causes complete havoc for everyone in the society. There are these people who have money and power, and it's that with foundations that die with them, that literally are scheduled to die with them. That was crazy like just the most like anti-human thing to do. You know what I'm saying? Like I am like, this needs to die with us in this room because things are changing and I don't like that. And I'm like, you don't want to, like, you're not investing in real education. You're investing in law and economics. So to muddy the waters with, in a lot of different cases. But essentially these guys are like, they're funding, they're funding a lot of different things. And it's crazy because what we had, recently with the whole, I don't even know how to phrase this to not get like censored on YouTube, but like what happened recently, how we view kind of science and stuff like that is essentially like you think about Republicans as the people who were kind of on the front lines for basically saying things like, oh no, this actually isn't right, and going to do their research here. But when it comes down to like the fact that your fishermen are coming back without fish because the rivers are poisoned, that is not something that requires like that amount of foresight. But but it's crazy to me. But hey, it's I take the wins that I can get. I am completely on their side in terms of, or not completely, but I'm on their side for a lot of things in terms of recent events. But that's pretty insane. This idea of also like Jane goes into how there was like a kind of this push, right? This push for Republicans in this 2012 election where Obama was reelected, right? So the idea was, hey, look, let's power this system, and ultimately the idea is that they failed, because Obama had a lot of these connections or whatever. And I am kind of mixed. I'm mixed on this because in one stance it's just like, okay, well, I don't think a lot of people, even within kind of the more critical of the black community, give merit to the idea of really the image of a black president in terms of what that could do for young people to see that, right? It doesn't seem like they give enough credence to that. And on the left, it's just like people aren't really paying attention to the idea of really this increase in using drone warfare and really what he was able to do. I think it's a mixed bag, and I think it's certainly complicated in terms of what could have been happening, but one thing for sure is I am not going to be pro Obama or really necessarily starch against Obama. One thing that's for sure is that it's a gray area. I could imagine that there's a lot of, I mean, when you got this much money going against you, it's something, and I think that definitely, like that, like that's something that deserves more understanding. And the reason why I'm not pro is, I mean, that's not like the drone. I'm firmly against like the idea of increasing drone warfare, right? So whatever the politics could have been, your hands being tied in a lot of situations, that's not really something that I'm willing to intellectualize as you doing more for, or you doing whatever. And that's kind of, I think that's kind of where I stand on a lot of what's going on. But apparently, the idea was, Obama was able to kind of go against a lot of these essentially like corporate giants, and and win despite really the opposition against him. And this opposition, I mean, these guys had some pretty questionable, like these guys had insanely questionable tactics, and they, we think about this idea of a presidential race as having kind of the primary importance, and I think a lot of particularly with the Renaissance, I think what's going to happen is that focus is going to be essentially shifted, and that focus is going to shift towards essentially making your local politicians the celebrities that we make presidents now, right? So that idea of if you ask someone who their local politician is, they have to think or, hum and ha, but everybody knows who the president is. And I expect that. I think when I think about a renaissance, I think that shift is that shift is going to be very drastic, and people may have to hum and ha in order to understand who the president is, and really have more of an understanding of who their local politicians are, and where they can find them, and essentially make them celebrities, and make sure that they don't mess up. And I think that'll be a lot more powerful in terms of getting things done. And one thing about this particular like network, this shift or this idea of like local politics, they failed on the presidentials, like in terms of who's in the White House, but they actually had tremendous success for controlling a lot of local politicians and local politics. Because I mean, if you could imagine if you're in like kind of a rural town, and all of a sudden your opposition gets $2 million, that completely shifts the what can happen there, and that's very much that's very much a problem in itself, the fact that money could shift politics in general, and how money shifts politics. And the idea that somebody can come in and shift local politics is a tremendous problem that I think needs to be solved in a lot of different ways. But the loopholes were there. We'll call them loopholes, because one thing about this Coked Octopus was hey, we're gonna find loopholes and loopholes to fund politics, and a lot of those loopholes came through foundations, and the idea was the donors, they were able to kind of remain anonymous, and that was a lot of the power there, because it was just like, hey, how are we going to essentially control this, control something without necessarily showing our hand and exposing our interest in what we're doing here. And they were able to figure it out, and foundations had a lot to do with it, and it's very much insane. Like the way they kind of used money, they were dirty. They fought like in the trenches in terms of like the local politics. They were like making explosive claims and lying and kind of using the fear of really Muslims in general. I seen a case where like they were saying, oh, you're going to help fund this mosque or something like that in place of some, I forget what exactly happened, but it was just this politician made a completely unbased claim that his opponent was funding a mosque, and that was like, I mean, just imagining being able to just simply say that is crazy. Like that's very much questionable in terms of whether people should be allowed to just make blanket statements like that. But I mean, that's kind of how it was done in a lot of these cases. And I mean, if you got enough money, then I mean those ads and campaigns, they make it seem a lot more real, even if you are completely full of it, like it will make it seem real. And that's in terms of like these guys, the support for the locals, that was their win. So it seemed like I would say it seems like they lost, but the win was the local politics, and I would say the education and creating these and creating more believable kind of where the success is in AstroTurf campaigns, where the success is in law and in funding schools and stuff like that. At some point, they funded they had some pretty significant, I think it was George Washington, I forget what, but it was like essentially the school was falling apart, and they were able to kind of save it and rebrand it. And essentially this place just becomes, I mean, you could imagine, this place just becomes a propaganda machine, and they're able to people who assume, or people who would claim to be intellectuals, will spew just BS everywhere. And I mean, they have a tremendous amount of support. Like my school went through this with me, so why would this, not be the truth? It's actually very much. I mean, it's insane. It's literally like you're creating a society filled with people that are fighting for corporations that are destroying the world, that would destroy the world if it gave them that much more power or that much more money. I mean, it's actually insane. And at one point, I think Jane wants to kind of make it clear in terms of this idea of the difference, right, between the left and the right, because there's this character, George Soros, and this is kind of a billionaire, shady billionaire that's more so that's kind of more so on the left, and she criticized him openly and created kind of a articles about what George Soros has been up to and stuff like that, and he responded to those articles and responded to the criticisms, and in a way that was somewhat, I would say, almost. I guess he kept it more civil, but when it came down to the Kochs, they did not react. They were aggressively. They were aggressive and really shady in how they went about their opposition and their critics, and how they controlled opposition and their critics. Some people were just like flat out at some point, like there was like a detective that was essentially like responsible for one of the investigations, but he gets out as he notices he's being followed. And this is like I think this is an FBI agent or something, but he gets out and he essentially holds the guy at gunpoint. He's like, "Yo, what's going on here? You're following me?" And he's like, "Oh no, I'm a private detective." And it's just like, is this like making things better? Like, what are you like? This is, it was pretty stark. But these guys are not above doing shady things, and that's very much, or they weren't above doing shady things. I'm not sure what they're up to now. I don't assume they're up to much better, but the idea of shady tactics, they were aggressive, and just simply refuting a lot of the claims, but not really addressing them. So like they would say, oh, I this is not true, but not address anything in particular. It was just like, oh, okay, well, I'm glad to know that this whole article that Jane came up with was essentially like fake news. It was just like, this is interesting. Like you can not address that and still be like, and that's kind of, I think that's a lot of the power in a lot of these corporations. They don't necessarily they're not beholden to the public like a lot of our representatives should be. And I think that's a lot of the power now, thinking about kind of the teeter-totter, that goes on, like, when it comes down to, running over, essentially, I think there's, a Native American, there was, some kind of huge thing in, I forget where, but they were just, trying to fight this oil pipeline. It was, really big. And I remember, specifically, I remember, literally, I think I called the sheriff or something back in the day or something like that, or I called the department. I was like, hey man, this is messed up or something like that, but this is part of a movement. But in terms of how a lot of this stuff ends up, you'd be surprised about how they control the information. I don't even know how that ended up. In terms of that particular pipeline, that wasn't really a situation where I was able to understand what happened here. There was no network to understand or to keep these people accountable, and a lot of people. There's a teeter-totter between how power can work, right? So if there is opposition to this pipeline, maybe some kind of private security company will be more successful in essentially just making sure that, basically keeping us peasants quiet. And, that's essentially, I would imagine, what takes place in the majority of situations. They teeter-totter between public and private, and that is very much a problem that I think needs to be addressed. Now, this idea of an oligarchy and where we're at now, and I think it's really important because like I said, the average Republican would view themselves as anti-establishment. And it's important to understand that this idea of an oligarchy is, a lot of it is essentially it's rooted in this Republican system, and it's important that that we fight back and hold people accountable. This whole deal with the H there's kind of an argument now around, or there was an argument very recently about these H-1B visas, and it's settled around. I think we need to kind of change the program, but what's not in the conversation is the fact that one of the people responsible, Vivek, he had kind of he had an interview where he explained that, hey, with a lot of these situations, the specifically the H-1B visa is like, it's exploitative, and in my experience, it's better to simply start from scratch, and that is not what we got, So this guy Vivek now, he's pro H-1B visas, and it's pretty. I mean, it's disgusting to think, because at some point he actually had a point where he released his tax records to kind of show and try to be transparent, and that, while I may not agree with everything this guy says, one thing about it was okay, well, I'm going to show you where my money's at. I thought that was a pretty big statement, because if you don't know, if the U.S. makes sure one thing, it's that they get their due about a lot of, unless you're a billionaire, they make sure that you pay your taxes. It's pretty insane. But at some point it was just he wasn't really held accountable or held to the standard of following, and he wasn't held, he fell short. He fell short, and that was very disappointing. But what was really more disappointing was to see that this resolved around an element of, we're going to make sure that this particular visa is done right and improved in some way, rather than completely scrapped, and essentially called it what it is, because a lot of these companies are just simply coming, or having people come over and essentially be indentured servants to whatever company that they are coming over to, or whatever company that helps them come over. And that right there is, the idea of holding these guys accountable, I think, is going to be a tremendous effort, and this is going to be something that people need to understand something. This Trump particularly ran on this he a lot of, maybe not ran on this in terms of came out of his mouth, but a lot of people who were advocates for Trump were saying that he was anti-war, but he came and he made a pretty explosive statement recently about the idea of Greenland and Canada and war with Mexico, and he made these statements, and I think a lot of us are going to have to really come to a realization that there is no left party and right party. They are two hands on the same body, and we need to come to that realization and come to that new understanding of what could happen and what is going to happen. And in terms of with the rich people, they, a lot of Jane was saying how a lot of these guys were essentially they were saying the standard rhetoric around, if you work hard then you can do this, and it was these guys, while I agree with that statement, please work hard, please, don't believe that this is going to, whatever your dreams are impossible because of this. I think that statement is, if anything opposite to that, is a disservice. They're doing a disservice to you, or if you're hearing that from any source of information, it's a disservice to you. And I think, but this idea of these guys who tout this the most, a lot of these guys are trust fund kids. They get like some pretty, they just get. They get a tremendous head start a lot of times, and that's something that a lot of people need to understand. Like, it is like they like the way that they're able to talk is so counter to their general experience a lot of the times. And at some point, we talk about kind of how this idea of we came into where we're at now, like these foundations, they kind of have this idea of creating news teams and research, quote unquote, that is essentially basically evidence, or that's kind of serving their corporate overlords. And this can easily turn into a problem, and I think we need to understand, or this has become a genuine problem now, but I think we really need to understand that and come to that conclusion. This idea of really the book in general and how the book ends is really how there's a changing of brands, right? And I think is like was wellness, or I want to say like they're changing brands, and they're using kind of like hot buzzwords and trying to make sure that they're viewed differently, and they molding to essentially have a solid veneer of, oh, we're for the general populace, and they won't be, and they're not a lot of times. It's pretty stark, and I really, really do believe that we need to make local politicians famous, and really hold them accountable, even more so than the president and what's going on there. And even in that case, like there was no mention. I haven't heard any mention of Greenland, or war with Mexico, or Canada, maybe Mexico. I know immigrants is kind of a big thing for Trump, but I'm pretty sure, making Canada the 51st state and the Greenland, like I'm pretty sure that was not on the campaign trail and on the like if you are in any way like thinking that Trump was like somebody who was for the middle class and the average person, I highly doubt that the average person has some kind of map. I'm like imagining like just the everyday like farmer or something, or plumber coming in and just looking at a map and thinking like, man, like if we had Greenland, if we had Greenland in Canada, maybe like I could afford medicine or something. Like it's messed up. It is so messed up. It's so fun. It's like how we view that right there should be that is. I think I think it's great branding, right? Like he says, hey, the Gulf of Mexico should be called the Gulf of America, and and I'm like, that's like, it feels like you're trying to like stir up this element of pride, and I think that is definite. And I think there's an element of like it's a real genuine like. There's a genuine intelligence behind stirring up pride in that way, and especially with the populace that you're talking to in terms of like make America great again. You know, like we should totally do these things. But the reality is that a lot of what's coming out, I think a lot of us need to see something. The idea of Trump being in office and the possibilities of actually having to send our children off to some foreign country to essentially, kill other people or die in the process. That should, no pun intended, I think that should trump every single bit of this this glamorization that we have of what America was or what America could be, and it should unite a lot of us. And with that being said, please do all the podcast stuff, do all the YouTube stuff, like this video, subscribe to the channel and stuff like that. And I'm hoping to see you next time. Thank you.